It's planting season, and no matter how much you plan, something unexpected always happens. Today, we're talking with two of our experts from the field about planting stories. Welcome back to Around the Farm, the podcast about all things ag. Today, we're joined with two of our experts from the field. I'm your host, Andy Folta. With me are Lantz Cornett, who, what's this, your third time on the podcast now, Lantz?
Yeah, I guess this is my third time, yeah.
You're a seasoned veteran, but we're happily joined and elevated by the presence of our good friend, Heather Freebairn.
Thank you, Andy. My first time on the podcast.
First, hopefully not last.
Hopefully not last.
You want to tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I started my career at Bayer about 5 years ago. Fun fact, my first day on the job was the derecho of 2020. Fun fact. But I started as a DeKalb Asgrow FSR in Northeast Illinois. Took some time with the Climate FieldView group for the last couple of years, and now I'm a crop protection rep in kind of the northern part of the state.
Okay, so crop protection rep, and you have that background with both seed and digital. What did you do before you came to Bayer?
I actually have 10 years of ag retail experience. So I get to give the full gamut of around the farm and fun planting stories. Not only that, but I was married to a farmer, and come from a farm family background.
Sounds like you got a bit of a cold. Where'd that come from?
Got a little bit of a cold, some allergies kind of coming in here in the spring. So forgive the voice today.
So yeah, thanks for joining the podcast. Great to have you here. Really excited to dig into some of your experience and yours as well, Lantz, about anytime that something goes wrong, that's Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will. So, starting here, really getting started with planting, we're kind of here in that April, May timeframe. People are really starting to get rolling. What are some of the things that you guys are seeing happen out there in the countryside right now?
First of all, probably the biggest problem is that most of our farmers are not very technology savvy. Technology, updating their iPads, getting ready, making sure all of their monitors are ready to go before they go to the field. So they'll go to the field and they'll be like, shoot, what can go wrong will go wrong. And they think that, just because their neighbor Charlie is planting corn next door, they better be planting corn or beans as well.
Yeah, it always seemed to me like the first couple weeks, whenever we started rolling, whether it was, when I was a seed rep, crop protection rep, or a digital rep, the first couple days and weeks were always the hurdles. But once you got through those, things started to roll a little bit smoother.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when I was thinking, what's really going right now, we've kind of been stymied a little bit in pockets with some rain and some different weather events. So the guys that got going early, maybe they're probably a little bit further ahead than most, but it kind of feels like everybody's kind of waiting on Easter in my area. And then, we get through this rain over the weekend. I think everything will be, full steam ahead. But it is amazing, like kind of what you mentioned with getting everything updated and ready for springtime. It's the first 2 weeks, it seems like, where everybody's testing stuff out, tinkering with different things and trying to get it all figured out. But then once those first 2 weeks and the kinks are worked out, it's full steam ahead.
Yeah, I remember when I was a field rep and I had just come from the crop protection world into climate. And we were talking about this a little bit before we came out here to start filming in the shed that, whenever you come a field rep for a certain brand, you always learn that first season or the first couple weeks, you learn all the troubles on your own out there in the field. And I know the first probably 3 to 5 phone calls that I got every year whenever people were getting back into their equipment were all around, how do I get this set up? How do I get my account mapping? And one of my favorite calls that I got, had to be my first week. I had looked at all the troubleshooting guides and I started diagnosing 6 steps down the road. And the farmer that had called, he just couldn't get his data to map. And I said, well, what are you seeing on your iPad? And he said, well, what iPad are you talking about? So sometimes it's the easy things that you need to start with.
And what a relief it is when it is one of the easy things, right? Because then it's, as much as we don't want to pin it on user error, it is nice when it is user error, because that means that we're actually performing the way we've said we're going to. But yeah, it's always nice when you get that phone call. I can't see myself in the field. And your first question is always, okay, what color is your puck? Because if it's green doesn't mean go. Green means you've got power. And so unless it's solid blue, you're not going to see yourself because you're not connected to your iPad. So that's always it's always my first step, is to make sure that we've got the right connections in place. And then from there, we figure it out. But generally speaking, the first 2 weeks are a lot of those easy questions of, I can't see myself, I can't get this connected. And it's usually a simple fix.
Yeah. So, thinking about that first week, because I know, a lot of guys, I think like my dad, if I'm away from technology for 3 to 6 months. I've put my iPad down after harvest and I'm just coming back for the first time of the year. I'm not super familiar with the things that I have to do to make sure that my data's mapping and being collected. What are some of those easy steps that you guys would recommend people go through in that early part of the year when they're first getting back into the tractor?
I think first and foremost, one thing that we try and make sure that everybody knows ahead of time, especially in the fall, is to not update your iPads in the fall. So springtime's a great time for that. Make sure your iPads are updated. Make sure all your systems and softwares are up to date within, if you're running a 2020 or something like that. And then maybe factory reset your network settings. I think that's a big one for making sure that your drives are communicating properly. And if you've got a drive 1 that's, maybe still out there, good opportunity to look at maybe getting a drive 2.
Ooh, hey, good plug.
There you go.
Plug.
But if maybe that's not in the budget right away, maybe we look at getting some on-farm support there to factory reset your drive 1. But given the state of where FieldView's going, I would say now's a good time to look at a drive 2.
Heather, what would you recommend people consider when they're first getting started?
So all the things that Lantz recommended, but the other big thing that I found throughout my travels, just because of a lot of different colors, if you will, of equipment, is just making sure they update their GPS and their monitors as well. As technology is constantly changing and cell towers, how those different GPSs are being pulled into the tractors. Those are very, very important to update.
Yeah, for sure.
And one other thing I would add too, as you're kind of getting your hybrid list set up, add that and fix those, or set your hybrid list within your cab app to where you can quick plug and play once you get in the field there.
Yeah, and I know that's something that a lot of our internal teams, like the TAs and FSRs, as well as dealers, will go out and do for their farmers, or upload all of the hybrids and varieties they plan to plant, and also all of our good crop protection products in the cab app. I would also recommend that people go through and look at how much data you have saved on your iPad, and if you can clear some data off there, do that. I know I went to it was a Channel Seed Pros customer appreciation night before planting, and we had everybody's iPads and we were uploading all of them, and we were going through and helping farmers clear off some old data to make sure that they would have enough space to be able to collect all the data that they needed that year. Yeah, it's a great recommendation. So all great information, but as we get further into the season, planting starting to get in the rear view mirror, and we're starting to move into to crop protection season. As we look back at planting season, were there any major mishaps or things that went wrong?
We had a good one. We were trying to get some things set up, and things just weren't jiving. And I don't want to, I can't really get into more specifics to say other than that, but it just wasn't working. And we had one farmer he'd had enough, and he wanted to map, but he'd had enough. And so he grabbed one of the monitors and he tossed him from his tractor straight out into the end row from 15 feet up, whatever. And he called his rep and said, "Hey, you can come pick this up. It's in the end row. I'm going to keep planting." And after he did that, he kind of realized, maybe I shouldn't have done that, because now how am I going to map everything? Well, I had a drive in my backpack. We stuck a drive back into the diagnostic port to the tractor. I got everything back talking, and within 5 minutes, he was able to actually map what he was having problems with. So it was interesting to see him go from one extreme to the other, and I get it, right? Because we've got you've got a short window to get things right here in the field, and when technology gets in the way, that can be a huge frustration. So being able to help them navigate those frustrations, because you were mentioning earlier, planting comes around, and it's been 6 months since I've gone through this technology interaction. It's that way for us too, right? I mean, we deal with it more frequently because it's our job, but we go through one planting season every year. We go through one harvest season every year, and each of those seasons is vastly different than the other. I had a guy tell me one time, he goes, "Well, I've been farming for 19 years. But that means I've got 1 year of experience 19 different times." And it struck me so well that's exactly what this is. Like every year is different. There are some similarities and maybe there's some patterns, but every year is something different. It could be technology driven. It could be weather driven. Who knows? But to be able to help these farmers in a way that will allow them to see and visualize every acre on their farm, that's what the end goal is from the digital perspective. So it was just an interesting day where, to see that one monitor go flying out the window, it was, was kind of shocking, but it was like, okay, we've been here before. We've handled stuff like this. Let's just throw a drive and go. And sure enough, that worked. And he was able to map, and everything worked out well.
Yeah. I love that experience. And I've experienced that a lot myself, that frustration period whenever, you get an inch and a half of rain and you get rained out for a week, 2 weeks. And then whenever you're able to start going, technology's not working. I still want to be able to plant or spray or harvest and do whatever I can. I had one farmer that called me, and this was around Bloomington, somewhere, Illinois, whenever I was a rep. And he said, my app's not mapping. I'm driving to the field and I'm planting. It could have been spraying. It could have been harvesting, and it's just not mapping. I don't know what the problem is. I went through my basic troubleshooting steps, and it still wasn't working. And so, hot time of the year, I was like, well, I'll hop in the truck and I'll start driving. It was about a 40-minute drive. I got 20 minutes into my drive, and he called me back and he said, actually, I figured it out. I'm just not planting. And it was something between the rate controller and the row units. He went out there to try to do, to test the depth, and there were just no seeds in the ground. And it wasn't mapping just because it wasn't mapping. But he had gotten to that point of frustration where, something's not working. I need to be able to get out there and do what I need to do. And he called the team that he had around him, and eventually we got it working. Yeah, 100%. So Heather, moving into crop protection season, and thinking about spraying and scouting, what tales from the field do you have there?
Well, I mean, not just crop protection, but also even the importance of making sure the planting maps are correct for our seed teams as well, to understand exactly where our products or different products have been planted within the fields. So their crop specialists, their reps can go and scout them and learn how new products are performing. Or if there is a problem, like if we've planted some soybeans or some corn or something and we have some frost concerns, it gives them a good idea of where the planting date, where those products are located in the field. They can drop a pin. The new pin app on the Climate FieldView is so cool. Yeah. Pretty excited about the fact that we can start having that visual of a bug or a weed or a disease or something like that actually in the field that the reps can help communicate with the growers. That'll be really important and helpful when they start looking for different weeds. Hey, here's a weed in the field. They can take a picture, send it to their rep, drop that pin in the field, and they'll know where to go back and do that scouting. So
yeah, 100%. We just launched new updates to the black and gold app experience where you can drop a pin and you don't just see a different colored pin. You see an insect or a weed or a disease. Thinking back with your old ag retail mentality, how did you used to connect with farmers? And
so, I mean, we use Climate FieldView even back when I was in ag retail because it was really important to understand. And ag retailers even now really want to know, when did they get done planting that field? So if they need to go and do some post-spraying or even fertilizer or something like that, they have that time stamp of when that field was planted. It also, back to it lets them know where different hybrids have been planted, especially important now that different traits are available, so they understand exactly what herbicides can be sprayed on different corn or soybeans to make sure that they're keeping their crop safety in mind.
But that's one thing that I've really been impressed by, the evolution of what is FieldView. Just in the short time that I've been here for the last couple of years, when it started, it was a data collection tool that led to analysis. And now as we look at scouting and the evolution of what is scouting that can be done within the app and how that allows the advisors to build that connection piece, it's not a data collection tool anymore. It's a data connection tool. And it's a really nice way to be that advisor and that most trusted advisor for your grower. And the more that I think the retail partners that we have get comfortable with using it, the more impactful they're going to be in their business. And then, we're just always going to be there to support that.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm thinking of a case from back home in East Central Missouri, and it's super unfortunate whenever it happens, but it seemed to happen a lot in the past, and it doesn't happen as much now. But you think of the wrong field. I planted something that's susceptible to this herbicide in this field. I didn't know, my ag retailer didn't know, or my dad didn't know that I planted that variety in that field and the other variety in the other field, and you mix the two and you spray the wrong field with the wrong product. It doesn't seem like that happens as much anymore. And I think a lot of that goes back to that data connection piece and the transparency of knowing which field had which product at which time, so that I can then take that and share it to, dad or uncle or, my cooperator or even the ag retailer, so that we're double and triple checking every time we're out in that field to make sure we're doing the right thing. Yeah,
we had a similar example of that last summer where we were standing out on the kind of the farm lot, and we were up on a hill a little bit to where we could kind of oversee several different fields. And the farmer was pretty adamant that this field just doesn't look right from afar. And I didn't have the experience to really, understand what he was talking about, but he saw that wasn't the right shade of green, for lack of a better term. And sure enough, we went and checked it, and there was a disease issue on that field, and it was to the specific hybrid because he had that field split plant. And so now the question became, oh my gosh, where else have I planted this hybrid that I need to go check it? Well, through FieldView, we just pulled up his app. We pulled up the reports page and went to the planting tab, did a search by that hybrid, and that hybrid, we could click through that, and it told us for every field that he had planted that hybrid. In 10 minutes, we had a list of fields to go check, and he was able to be a little bit more proactive. It was still reactive, but more proactive than he would have been in addressing that issue, and he got that issue resolved in the middle of June. So that was pretty cool to see how he saw a problem in one spot and then used the digital tools to figure out where else that problem possibly could be. And he addressed that issue really quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you ever used FieldView, whether it's in a sales conversation or just as a light bulb type tool to have a conversation with a grower to show them something that they might not have seen in their own operation or make a recommendation?
We had a really cool one happen just a couple of weeks ago, and it was where the farmer had a field to the south that he bordered that was an organic field. Well, because it was organic, he had to leave a buffer of fungicide where he couldn't spray. He pulls into this field on the south edge, and he's going, and the combine's just reading terrible numbers. And he's like, what's going on? This hybrid, there's something wrong with this hybrid. And as he got further away from that buffer, it picked back up. And so we kind of dug a little bit and said, I don't think it's the hybrid so much as it is maybe a placement, or there's got to be something else.
Yeah.
So he shared with us the data, and we put it into a FieldView account. And come to find out, we've got his spray files as well. And to the row of where he left that buffer was 110 bushel off.
Oof.
And it was because did the entire fungicide pass save him 110 bushel? I would argue maybe not a whole 110 bushel, but obviously, it was to the row of that field. And two things happened because of that. One, he got a FieldView subscription for this year. Two, he's spraying fungicide on every acre because it just demonstrated the value. Even though he had to leave that buffer there, it was a really good way to easily visualize, hey, this is going to save us and make us more money and protect our yield in the future. And Delaro and Delaro Complete are the way to do that. So it was just a really cool, real world example to where he went from to I'm spraying every acre this year.
What a great sales tactic for a crop protection rep.
Really, we have a lot of examples like that where we can show not just through yield, but through the field health imagery or the vegetative imagery to show how after post-spraying, not just corn, but soybeans as well, how that crop has responded or stayed healthier due to a Delaro or Delaro Complete application within the field. And it's pretty telling because, we go back to this is that grower's data. So most of the time our customers are pretty emotional about the things that are going on. They're very proud of their operation and their farm and what they're doing. And it takes a lot of the emotion out of that conversation because it is their data.
Yeah.
It's what they've collected. It's actually what they've done. And when they can see it, for their own eyes, it really helps a lot with those conversations.
Yeah. That's one thing I've really liked about FieldView and digital tools in general and just working in the ag industry is that farmers love talking about nothing more than farming. And it's one of the only professions where, I'm going to go and do my job and then I'm going to go home and play the farming simulator game and do my job for, in my free time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you had any instances where you might have learned something from farmers from a digital standpoint or just an agronomic standpoint?
Every single time I go on farm. This industry has been fascinating to me. I don't have an ag background whatsoever. And so every time I go on farm, I'm just asking just different questions. And it's nothing maybe specific, but it is amazing to see how willing farmers are to share their information if you show a genuine interest in wanting to understand what is going on with their operation. And I look at it more as just it's a friendship more than it is anything else. The people that I work with and get to help on a day-to-day basis, I do anything for them, and I know they do anything for me too. They're always willing to share the information to an extent, right? We're not going to get too deep in the weeds, but if you're willing to ask the question, more times than not, they're willing to give you the answer.
Yeah, 100%. I think of Matt Ringler, who's a dealer that I worked with in East Central Illinois. He calls me all the time still to talk about, things that are happening in the ag industry, but also things outside of that. It's one of the best parts about our industry. One thing I really like about digital tools is that they're super customizable and you can use them in your own unique way. Are there any unique ways you've seen people use tools like FieldView?
Yeah.
Lance always has a story.
It does.
It's kind of funny how these just kind of keep coming to the top of my head. We had a guy one time who the power company was putting new power poles through, and the big metal ones that were, I don't know how big they are, but they were massive. But he had to figure out how much money that cost him through compaction. And through his FieldView app, he could see downforce and how compacted that was. And then we could also play out how that yield was impacted, but just by seeing the maps. We've got another example where there was it's another power line example, but it was a power line going through the field, and we couldn't spray fungicide underneath those power lines. And you get to looking at, and it's another example to show the power of fungicide. It was 25, 26 bushel off. It's a great example that we use in our DFI for Digital Farming Institute for all of our seed pros and any internal partners that we've got. But it's amazing what can be uncovered once you get things mapped. I'm a visual learner to begin with. So if I can put it in an iPad and see it in the palm of my hand and just kind of pick around at it, it's amazing what you can uncover with it all. So the power lines are a big storyteller from all kinds of different angles.
Yeah, for sure. I think the one thing that we don't talk about that's kind of fun and new is soil samples or the soil tests. That's something that I've kind of tried to introduce to customers throughout my time, and it's a fun visual. So back to the visual. They're really looking for someone to help them interpret their data, help them learn something from it, because they have so much to know and learn. If they can have somebody that can bring some value and kind of help them understand what is going on, help them set up good tests, help them understand and read what that looks like. But back to the soil tests, it can be pretty fun to go back and look at yield data and soil tests. And then, and then we haven't gotten into scripting yet, but then also start building some scripts based on all of that information in one place.
Talk to me about scripting, because I've been out of the field now for like 2 years, a little over 2 years. And I was really good at helping people get scripts into a Gen 3 or a Gen 2 or into any type of monitor. Tell me about whenever scripting goes well, but also whenever scripting can be a bit of a learning curve for some farmers.
From a when scripting goes well perspective, maybe I'm not going to have a good example of when it goes poorly. Maybe that's just because I'm an eternal optimist. But when scripting goes well, what a cool way as the seed pro or the retail seller to own that placement conversation. That takes you to an entirely different level. It not only allows you to make sure that you're getting your products on farm, you're getting your products on farm on the right acre, at the right population and densities, and you're really just owning that and providing a level of service that maybe hasn't been seen on the seed side so much as it has been on the fertility side at the moment. This new scripting tool that we've got is slick. It's fast. You can do a field in, I would say, 2 to 3 minutes once you kind of get get your hands on it and understand the process. It's got a density slider bar where you can be more aggressive or more conservative on it. But at the end of the day, you're delivering seed to the field at a much more precise manner. And I guess kind of the way I look at it going forward is we're no longer operation by operation. We're not even field by field anymore. We're literally acre by acre. And given, kind of just the markets where they sit, that's more important now than ever than to be, super critical of what we're putting where. And that scripting tool is a great step in the right direction.
Great plug about scripting. And I know that we have a video we just released on YouTube about, how to create a script in 2 to 3 minutes that you led. So
yeah, that's right. It's brief. It's digestible. I think it'll be really good for everybody to check it out. But give it a look.
And I love your positivity about scripting. But I know that, last year as we're launching things like Preceon, those comes with recommendations. And there were some pain points in there. So can either of you talk about what that experience looked like and how we're improving it?
In Northern Illinois, we've had quite a bit of experience with Preceon and scripting and trying to get those growers kind of used to running a script within the field. And sometimes it should be pretty simple. So most growers, once you get them put on the monitor, you understand how to plug them in. They're ready to go. Works really slick. We integrate with our partners really well to where we can help them even on the fly if they can't find it all of a sudden. Just this last week, we had a little oops, and it really wasn't our fault on the scripting side, but kind of back to technology and our customers, how they have some challenges. They had a new tractor that they had kind of retrofitted a monitor into. They really weren't sure about their boundaries and their AB lines and all of that, and they thought, oh, this may not go well. Well, I guess when they tried to run the script, it wasn't a great experience for them. But I don't think it was the script's fault. I think there was just maybe some technology issues in place.
Yeah, 100%. But, I look at those kind of like we've been talking about, whether it's in, planting, application, or harvest season. Things always go wrong, but to me, that's still just another opportunity to learn and, take that to next year to have a better experience.
Yeah, and at the same time, we have an experience with one of our press young growers where I showed up on farm 3 years ago, and they were a mess. We spent a lot of time, just getting all of that cleaned up, and then we sat down and actually, to Lance's point, placed all of their hybrids, did scripts for every one of them, and every time they looked at me, they're like, nobody's ever done this before, and really where they've come from there. Now they run RTK boundaries. They don't even plant fields. Like last year, I had to wait until they did their new RTK boundaries because Dad doesn't plant around the field anymore, right? Like, and they've really just advanced technology, but all they needed was somebody there to help them along with that. But even as I moved from climate to crop protection, we had kind of a scare of a breakup, but I reassured them that I was still there to help them do their prescriptions again this year. So still there.
When I was in the field, when I first at least came into climate, I think there was that stigma of, it's the young guys and the young gals that are the ones that are using the digital tools, and then grandpa or, Uncle Larry are just, doing it the old-fashioned way. But I will say, and maybe it was, the area that I was in Illinois, but I think it translates everywhere. It's not just the young people that are engaging with digital. It's, the older guys that are in their, mid to late 70s and even 80s who are using this.
Yeah, we were actually at Bottom Line Solutions there in Morton a couple months ago now. It was last fall. And two guys walked up, and it was a dad and his son. The dad was in his 80s. His son had just come back to the farm. He's wanting to learn the operation. He's in his 50s. And he was embracing digital because it was allowing him that bird's eye view of what is going on the farm. And it was really cool to kind of see. That's how we've been kind of promoting it for like the younger generations to kind of get their foot in the door and their feet wet for what is farming for the family farm. But it's happening at all stages of generations for learning the farm and understanding what's going on a day-to-day basis. It was really cool to see that kind of ownership from their side coming to us saying, hey, this is what we want to do. How do we do it? And then we could walk him through the process. And that's how he's getting up to speed a lot faster, where you can see, historical data and not just this is the farming season that I'm in. This is where I start my learning from.
No, I think it's a great story about tying legacy together through digital. And I constantly think, what would my grandparents, what would they think seeing the tools that we have now? And I'd be really interested in what their maps would have looked like from back in the day. But, what other stories do you have from the field?
Yeah, I guess to kind of tie back into the legacy piece, the one thing that kind of stood out to me one time I heard it was, the greatest crop you'll ever raise is the next generation. And when I think about legacy and on farm and getting everybody onto the farm through your family farm, digital is kind of that, I guess, to keep the analogy going. Maybe it's a seed treatment to your operation, right? Where it's not going to be the entire thing, but it's going to be the thing that gets you started into your family operation. So that's how I kind of view digital. But another cool, I guess, situation that we've had come up, and this kind of goes back to Heather's comments about taking the emotion out of a situation. We had a really large grower in Northern Illinois call one day and said, you know what, this isn't working. This product's not working anymore. I think we're going to go a different direction. And we said, hold on, this is obviously a very valuable account. You're very, important to us. Let's take a moment and figure out before we just go fly off the handle. So I worked with the TA and the FSR in that area. And within an hour, I had a 5-page report on every single field of theirs. And what we found out was we never really had a true apples to apples comparison to what's going on their operation. We were always either on the end rows or up against the timber soils or in the timber soils up against the timber and the fence rows. The fields where we actually had a true side-by-side comparison in the middle of a field, we'd win by 3 to 5 bushel. So while the stats were saying from the reports piece, hey, you're in the bottom third tier of everything that you're performing, it was all because of placement. It wasn't because of the products. So when we actually were able to single out the variables, we were able to I guess, save that farm, but more importantly, save the relationship, because it wasn't a he said, she said moment. It was more of a, look, this is what happened. This is where everything's at. And this is what we're going to do differently next year to make sure that we get a true comparison. And we ended up growing with that farm over the next 2 years. And I credit a lot of that to digital, because in an hour, we had literally a 5-page report of, several thousand acres. We were able to go through that much data in an hour to kind of have a starting point, have the conversation, and take the emotion out. And it really did wonders to the relationship as a whole.
Yeah, I know whenever I was a field rep for climate, I would always say that there were three things that would fix 85 to 90% of the problems. The old unplug it, plug it back in, just like a Nintendo 64. I would go into your settings on your iPad, the actual settings, and reset your network settings to refresh that connection. And you can do that with anything, any Bluetooth device. And then I would delete out the old piece of equipment in your cab app and build a brand new one exactly the same. And those three things seem to fix a lot of those startup issues anytime we were starting for planting, application, or harvest.
That might have been many moons ago, but those stories still play true today. It's the same three or four things. It seems like every single season we get started, it's the same things, and what a relief it is when it is those things, right?
Oh yeah. But that's whenever those things don't work, that's the beauty of having a Lantz or a Heather that's connected with a team that you can go out there and call and get on farm 100%. So Heather, you had an additional story from the field.
Yeah, I wanted to share a story about how do we use data to kind of help solidify things, because a lot of times our customers forget what they did yesterday and they think they know how something happened at planting, but maybe they forget exactly how it happened. This particular example was up in northern Illinois, close to one of the nuclear plants. So this gentleman was actually the manager of the nuclear physicists at this plant. Oddly enough, he could tell us how to make a bomb. That was kind of a fun fact during our stay. So this guy was pretty intelligent, right?
Yeah.
And he was pretty versed at reading data and things like that. And it kind of ties back to the crop protection world, because unfortunately his retailer had a little mishap spraying his soybeans in the middle of June. And when we got the call, the particular retailer maybe had a little 32 in the tank when they sprayed these beans, and the beans didn't like it very much. So there were some twigs just standing out there. And in that field, there were two different varieties of soybeans. And you could tell right to the line where that was at. So apparently for anybody out there, soybeans do have different tolerances to different things. That tissue does react in different ways. But he was pretty bent on the fact that he had started planting one particular variety, and then he had stopped and he'd filled up like at this one spot. And by using his data, we kind of just talked through it one day. And he's like, no, this is what happened. And I just asked some general questions of him. And as he went back through it, and I was asking these questions, suddenly over the phone, he got pretty silent. And he's like, oh, I guess that is what happened right there.
The light bulb went on.
The light bulb went off.
You showed him to the light. Yeah.
I showed him to the light. And so it was pretty fun to go back and kind of use his own data to help even a very intelligent man kind of remember what had happened.
That's a super nice way to show someone, the truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to kind of
Lance, I see you leaning in.
Yeah, it's one of those it's not me, it's you moments.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. I've had those.
I had another story that kind of came to mind, and it's more along the lines that we always get questions on about data privacy. And I had an FSR take me to a grower one time who was using FieldView, to his credit, but the FSR had kind of warned me he's a little skittish on what he's putting in there because he thinks that, maybe Bayer's got access to what he's doing.
Yeah.
To the extent that he was coding every hybrid a different hybrid number, and he would have it like in his pocketbook. He would look at it and he'd say, okay, well, 6606 is actually, a channel number. And he would flip them back and forth so that he would know, but we wouldn't know. It was like his own little Orphan Annie decoder pin that he needed from, But what was really neat is whenever we showed up on farm and I said, hey, can we just have a conversation around what is data privacy and what that looks like for FieldView? And he was super interested in it. And we walked him through kind of the user agreement and all the data privacy stuff in there. And then I said, I'll take you one step further, and I'm going to show you my account, my actual support account, to where I can show you whenever I proxy into your field or to your account, this is all that I can see. And so what was really cool in that moment, in less than an hour, we had this conversation, and he totally saw, I guess you could say, the light, right? Of we're not out here to get him. We're out here to help his operation become more profitable. And in that hour, he went from I code all of my hybrids to I'm going to fix all of my hybrids, and I'm going to share my account with my FSR and me as the DEL. And we were able to provide him just a different level of service because we knew exactly what we were working with that shared relationship. And just a couple of days ago, he called me with another question that was related to his new equipment setup. And we got him going with a drive 2 and a resistor cable. And that went really, really well. But it was neat to see, there's a lot of buzz out there about our data privacy, what that's really like. And when you actually sit down with somebody and explain it to them, we're not out there to get you. That's never going to be the case. It's out here because we're trying to build that connection piece, either through the advisor, through the retailer, through the seed pro, and make your farm more profitable at the end of the day. That's the entire focus about what we're doing, especially now because we're tying it into Preceon, right? The ability to have that connection and that relationship, and then use your own data to develop your own scripts to deliver on the Preceon promise. That's where this is headed, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here.
The Preceon promise. And we're sitting here in a shed, and we're surrounded by seed. But that is the ultimate goal. It's just making data transparent so that if the seed performs, the farmer will see that. And if not, they'll ask the question, they'll have a conversation with their FSR, their TA, or their CBA.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, Heather, Lance, appreciate you joining since Tom couldn't be here today. We're out here on the Climate Research Farm, and I really enjoy this setup, doing things out here in the shed, surrounded by all the bags of Preceon and these wonderful insights about how you all work with farmers. So this has been Around the Farm, the podcast about all things ag. If you enjoy, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, invite a friend like we did today. This is our 3rd episode on the farm. We'll see you next time Around the Farm.